So I'm a candle maker, but I haven't always been. And I'm a candle business owner, but believe it or not, haven't always been. In fact, I started the same way that most of you have started, with zero experience. So I'm here to tell you as proof and through experience that it can be done to any level you want, small scale, large scale, or even just a hobby. But it all starts with the basics. And that's the purpose of today's video, to break down and really address those basics, just to help you guide you on what you should be focused on at the beginning stages of candle making. We'll review this into three major categories, which is your materials, your process, and your testing. But we're going to get into those each into more particulars, more specifics around each. Because just like with sports or really anything else, if you struggle with the fundamentals, it makes everything else so much harder. And I want to get you on the right track. If you're new to this channel, my name is Wade. I'm the owner of Black Tie Barn. Feel free to check out the links in the description below for a little bit more information about me, the company, what I do, what I make, what I sell. Check out the website, the Facebook groups. I also now do consultations to help other candle makers. Well, I used to do them a lot. I'm back to doing them again, as well as really other resources that can help you out. So if any of that interests you, check them out in the description below. There's a lot of great resources down there. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're interested. I've got some new major announcements coming as something that Black Tie Barn is going to be now providing as another, let's just say, another service to other candle makers. So that is coming soon. So definitely subscribe so you don't miss out on that news, that release. All right, so let's talk about materials and supplies, or suppliers even. There is a vast amount of different types of supplies and different suppliers when it comes to purchasing what you need to make your candles. Some suppliers only sell fragrance oils. Some only sell wax, some wicks, some jars, some a whole plethora of everything you might need, but might not have something specific you need that you still have to get somewhere else. What I'm trying to say is that there's no shortage of options out there. So my suggestion starting out as a candle maker is to pick suppliers that are either local nearby to you to eliminate shipping, or try to consolidate your purchases to one or two suppliers at the most, just to lower the cost of shipping and all of your materials. It just makes it a lot easier for you growing. You can always scale, you can always change things later, but let's try to keep it simple at the very beginning. And when choosing a supplier, other than based off of location, when you are choosing one to maybe consolidate to, do a lot of sampling and testing at first if you are not sure. So if you have not settled on one, you're not sure who to settle on, check reviews, talk to others in the Facebook group, just get some recommendations of a good place to start. Again, you can always change later, but just be comfortable with your first choice, be comfortable settling on one, at least for a while. And of course, shop around for best pricing. So just because you found something you like and found something nearby, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best choice. Always at least shop around a little bit for pricing, because you might notice a significant difference. And the hardest thing as a new candle maker isn't just the process of learning to make a new product. It's also trying to control the cost of doing that. So we want you to be in this for the long run. The best way to do that is to minimize cost and not to get too overwhelmed. So those would be the biggest takeaways when it comes to shopping for supplies and shopping through suppliers. The next thing I want to talk about is storage and inventory. And again, this really is in that main category under materials and supplies. And what I want to talk about, I guess first and foremost, is that a cool, dry storage is optimal in almost all situations. Fragrance oils, waxes, jars, it doesn't matter as much. You don't want any extreme heat or cooling. I mean, you don't want them to crack because they froze. But for the most part, a cool, dry place is what you're looking for. So you'll find a lot of materials stored in like basements, but not if there's moisture. Warehouses, if they're temperature controlled. Any room in your house that is environmentally controlled is typically fine. What you don't want is a lot of humidity and fluctuations that are significant in temperature. So if you don't want to be in a place that's maybe jumping up to 80 and 90 degrees and then back down to 50s, so try to avoid those major fluctuations. Try your best to keep them in a controlled environment. Somewhat cool and dry is optimal. Let's talk a little bit about organization of your materials and supplies. So I know this might sound like a little advanced for just getting started, but I can tell you one of the most surefire ways to get overwhelmed as a new maker is being unorganized. I can tell you from experience. I will show you some footage of some of my organization mishaps, let's call them, over the years. Sometimes it's because you just, things come in too quickly. Other times it's because you get so busy so quickly that you just don't make time like you should to stay organized. So even on a very small scale, even if you're just buying a case of wax and a few fragrance oils, wicks and things, just do your best to keep organized. If you've got a closet, a room in your house, Get a label maker, make your life easier keeping these things separated, organized, and controlled. Make sure you know what you got and how much you got. As you continue to grow a little bit and you want a system to help you do that, there are a lot of options out there. You can use something like Excel or Google Sheets if you want. I prefer a system dedicated to tracking my supplies and inventory. And that is a software called CraftyBase. There are other options as well. That's the one that I use. I've used it for a number of years. You can check out the link in the description below if you would like to try them out. You can do a free trial, and then they have a few different plans, but they do have like a starter plan that is affordable and gets you 90% of what you're going to need anyways. But it does help you not only keep track of your materials, but also how many you have on hand, the cost of all those materials, so you know exactly how much value you have in inventory, which is always important. But you also build your recipes for your products in there. So you know what materials exactly go into what candle, what jar, what wax, what vessel, what wick, everything. And not only do you know what materials go into it, but how much go into it and the cost it took to make that product. So it's a dynamic solution that's always tracking this for you. And so you know exactly how to price your products because you know what they cost. You know when you're short on a material because the system's tracking it for you. You never forget how to make your product. And as you start making a lot of products, that is the thing. It can be hard to remember everything. So I would check out CraftyBase if I were you. Again, that link is in the description below. It is a custom link for me. So again, it's an affiliate link. I've been using them for 8 years now, I think, 7, 8 years, something like that. So I do recommend you checking it out. I also have an overview video, by the way. That was a very quick summary. I'll try to remember to link that video, and you can check out a more detailed video that I did showing you what that system can do. But again, if something like that isn't for you, you can always do this manually. It just becomes a little overwhelming and a little harder to do. But my suggestion either way is just to make sure you're organizing yourself somehow, some way. All right, so enough about where to get your supplies and how to manage them. Let's talk about the actual supplies themselves. So of course, if you're making a candle, and when I say this, I'm mostly talking about container candles or jar candles. And these are candles that you make in a vessel, right? So you need a jar or some type of container for that. You can find metal tins, ceramic, concrete vessels, glass is the most common, but there are several options out there. Of course, you can skip this step if you're making pillar candles or votive candles. Those also require different types of waxes and usually different wicks as well. It's a different process, but most candle makers are starting with container candles. So you need a container. And I actually like to start with the jar or the vessel first. So as a new candle maker, you might be thinking, well, should I start with my wax first? Should I pick my oil? Many people will tell you to settle on a wax first. The reason is because that is arguably the most important part and the hardest thing to change later is your wax. That is true. And I've gone back and forth on this myself. But as a new candle maker, you typically have an idea of what kind of look you're going for. Like you know what your candle, what you want it to look like, the type of candle you want to make. And I find it easier to start with the vessel that you want to use. Now, you might add more vessels later, sure, but I like to start with the vessel I want to use. Then I start sampling waxes. And the reason I do it in that order is not all waxes play well in all containers. Some waxes are very tough to burn. And so once you get in a large enough vessel, it can be hard to wick properly and hard to get it to perform the way you want. And I don't want you to get deterred from making the candle that you want to make, using the jar that you want to make, just because the first wax you chose is giving you problems. So pick your jar, then start sampling waxes based off of that jar. That's your constant, so to speak, and the waxes now become a variable, and you go through sampling a few that you like, but we'll get to that in just a second. The most important thing is choosing a jar. They come in several different materials, like I just mentioned. They also come into several different shapes and sizes. Try early on to avoid crazy shapes, stars, weird ovals, and just try to keep it simple. Something round, something simple like this, like the ones you see behind me. Something simple, make your life easy. You can always get fancy and have fun later. The size is important, and not so much the size as far as total size, like tall or short. It's more about the width of the jar. The diameter is what's going to dictate the fragrance throw. We'll talk about this more later, because that's where the melt pool, the melted wax, is formed from the candle wicks burning. And it also will determine how many wicks you need to get that full melt pool. So when I talk about the size of the jar, I'm typically talking about the diameter. So after you've chosen the vessel that you like, and now vessels also come either clear a lot or opaque or semi-opaque. So you can kind of see through this, but it's mostly opaque. And then there's jars that are obviously clear. And there's ones that are like concrete or painted and you can't see through them at all. Pros and cons to each. If you're using colored candles, a lot of people like clear because you can see what that looks like, and it does look great. On the other side, having opaque jars where you can't see it through it will hide a lot of the defects, or not really defects, but cosmetic issues that sometimes candle waxes will show. A lot of people go that route these days, and they do have more of a contemporary modern feel. So it is ultimately up to you, but just choose a jar. Once you've done that, once you've chosen your jar, then as I mentioned before, I would move on to your candle wax. There are a ton of options when it comes to candle waxes. There are paraffin waxes, soy waxes, coconut waxes, palm wax, beeswax, apricot wax, and then there's blends of all of those. So it's a crazy exponential amount of waxes that always are being created because you can always blend all these waxes together. And you can buy them pre-blended or you can buy them yourself. The most common wax on the market is a parasoy, which is a paraffin soy blend. But they range in the ratios. Some are 70% soy, 30% paraffin. Some are the opposite. Some are 50-50. There's a whole plethora of options when it comes to parasoy. But there's also, and they're very common because it's sort of the best of both worlds. You're going to get the strong hot throw from a lot of your paraffin waxes, but you're going to get some of the natural properties of a soy wax, so you can market it as soy blends. You can get some of the opaque creaminess from your soy waxes, or you can get the more vibrant colors from paraffin. So there's a lot of reasons that people use parasoy blends. But there's also coconut blends, both coconut paraffin and coconut soy. A lot of blends include beeswax. There's coconut apricot. There's so many options out there. There's really no way to tell you what wax to use. It's going to come down to preference and just doing some research. So what I would advise is maybe hopping on a Facebook group. I've got one in the description below that I run, but there's several others out there as well. Maybe just do some basic researches and reviews on some of these candle supplier websites. So if you check out the reviews, that'll give you a good idea of what waxes people tend to be happy with. And then just sample them. So you can buy little blocks. Most people buy 10 or 11 pound slabs. That's enough for you to basically make a few candles and see how it goes. There are different pros and cons to every type of wax and wax blend out there. As I mentioned, some are better at strong scent when it's burning, which is called your hot throw. Some are better at strong scent when it's not burning. That's called your cold throw. It's just the smell of it when you walk by it without it actually burning yet. Some are more vibrant in colors. Some are more pastel. Some tend to produce less soot and smoke than others. Some are easier to wick than others. Some have a higher melt point, makes it easier to ship, but those are also typically harder to wick. So there's pros and cons to all these different waxes, and the key is testing yourself and figuring out what properties you like the most. Which ones give you the warm and fuzzies? Which ones is not going to make you want to lose your mind and get overwhelmed and quit candle making? So that's my suggestion. Test a few waxes based off some reviews and some general feedback from others in the industry and the community, and then just start validating those yourself through your own test. So you picked out your vessel or container and you picked out your wax. Unfortunately, those two combined just make a jar of wax. It won't burn and it won't smell. So the next thing we're going to talk about is fragrance and fragrance oils. And I'm going to also mention that there is the option of essential oils. However, most essential oils do not work very well in candles. That's not what they're designed to do. Most of them are very toxic. Most of them are very volatile, have low flash points. So you've got to be careful using them. You typically have to use less of them. They usually don't have very strong scent throw compared to fragrance oils specifically made for candle making. Now, we're not going to get into all the details of each and which one's right or wrong, good or bad, yes or no. There are other videos on that topic. You can ultimately choose. There are new essential oils that have been geared more towards candle making, which you can find on candlescience.com, for example. They have a line designed more for fragrance or for candles. But long story short, most candle makers are using fragrance oils. They are specifically designed to be used safely in candles. And these days, the fragrance oils are made safely and responsibly and perfectly fine to use in your candles. And so the way you choose how much fragrance goes into your wax to make your candle is based off of a percentage. Every wax type has a different amount of fragrance oil it can hold before it would kind of seep out, right? There's a max capacity it can hold. That ranges usually from anywhere from 5% up to sometimes 12, even 15%. The average for most waxes is usually around 9 or 10%, and most candle makers use usually around 8, 9, or 10% fragrance load into their candles. In other words, here's the amount of wax I'm using, multiply that by 8, 9, or 10%, that amount is how much you can use in fragrance oils. So let's make some quick math really quickly. 1 pound of wax, which is 16 ounces of wax. If you did 10% fragrance load, that would be 1.6 ounces of fragrance. So whatever percentage you choose, it's just a simple math equation. I've got videos on how to do this on different scales and which methods I like. But the point is it's measured by percentage, and you should also be measuring your fragrance oils by weight. So to make sure you're using the right amount of materials, and for consistency reasons, you do everything by weight, not by volume. Which is why sometimes, by the way, you will buy 2 different bottles of fragrance oils, for example. Both might be 16 ounces. That's by weight, usually, depending on the supplier. But it might have a different fill level in the bottle because one oil is heavier than the others. It's perfectly normal. That's why it's important to do this by weight. Now, fragrances, if you're curious, are made up of several different notes. So when you buy a fragrance called ginger and spice, for example, it's not just ginger and some random spice. It's got things like clove and cinnamon and nutmeg and ginger, and all these other notes make up that fragrance. And every fragrance oil is like this, and most suppliers will list what these notes are. There's top notes, middle notes, and bottom notes. Top notes are what you typically pick up first and most noticeably at the very beginning, but they will typically wear off rather quickly. And the middle notes are really what is the majority of the fragrance. It's really what rounds everything out. It's really what's you're going to smell the most through the entire burn of the candle. And then you got your base notes, which is really like the foundation of the fragrance. It's what gives it its staying power. It's what gives it like its undertones. And really, we could do a whole class on fragrance oils. I've got other videos that talk about fragrance oils in more detail if you want to check them out. But long story short, they're made up of a lot of complex notes already. So when you buy a fragrance oil, it's already pretty complex. It's already got all these different notes in it. And there are hundreds of thousands of fragrance oils out there to choose from. It makes it so much fun. It's actually the most fun part of candle making is all the options. You can buy oils like ginger and spice and fresh cut roses and fresh cut grass, or a banana smoothie or pumpkin pie, or you can get ones that smell like colognes and perfumes. You can get one called Santa Farts. Like, there's so many options out there, and you can name them whatever you want, but there is a vast amount of fragrance oils options to choose from. But wait, there's more. If you can't seem to find something you like, which is damn near impossible, you can blend your own and make something unique to you and your business and your hobby, which is super fun. Take something that you like, but you just feel like it needs a little extra, mix them, blend them. You can do it yourself. A lot of people like to do this by dipping Q-tips in and then putting them in a bag together. You can mess with ratios that way. Two Q-tips of one oil and 1 Q-tip of another. That's a 2-to-1 ratio. So things like that, you can develop your own scents based off of these oils that you purchase. So have fun with it if you want. But starting out, I'd recommend just going with some basic fragrance oils that already exist in the market. Don't overwhelm yourself too much, but have fun with it. You can do whatever you want, actually. All right, so now you've got your vessel. It has wax in it, and it has smelly good in the wax as well. But you still haven't made a candle yet unless it's got a wick. So let's add a wick. That's what's going to melt the wax, create a melt pool at the top, and that's what puts that fragrance into the air. Then you'll have a successful candle. Hopefully, probably not on your first time, but that's the goal. So let's talk about wicks. This is by far the worst part about candle making. Well, it depends. If you're sort of one of those people that just like crazy challenges and like to be stressed out all the time, then you might love this part. But this is the death of most candle makers. And this is where most people get very frustrated and give up, but also extremely important. So we're going to simplify this the best that we can. And I've got some other tips for you later on to help with this part of the process. But the purpose of a wick, as I mentioned, is to melt the wax across the top, create a melt pool that disperses the fragrance into the air. It doesn't sound too complicated, right? It basically uses wax as fuel to keep the flame going, and that's what continues to put out heat and melt the wax. It's not a complicated concept. Unfortunately, it's more complicated in practice and reality than it is in theory. And that is because not all waxes and wicks play nice together. So there are definitely certain wick types that work better for certain wax types. And that's why it's important to choose your vessel and your wax before you choose a wick. You'll never choose your wick first, ever. If anyone tells you to, don't take any more of that person's advice. You always need to know your wax and your vessel before you can choose a wick. Knowing your wax will help you decide what type of wick, and we'll get to that in a sec. And the vessel will help you decide what size of that wick or how many wicks. So let's talk about some of the types of wicks out there. There are straight flat braid, square braid, full cotton, cord wicks like zinc core, paper core. There's paper threaded. There's cellulose. There's all sorts of wood wicks. There's all sorts of different wick types out there. And many wicks will work in all sorts of different waxes. And some waxes don't really care so much what type. Many of them work well. So start with your wax, and on this channel, in the newsletter, in the Facebook groups, you'll get some pointers of good places to start. There's so many people in the community that are willing to help new candle makers out. And if you tell them what wax you're using and jar, you'll get recommendations almost instantly, and you'll get several good ones, at least as a good starting point. It will vary for everyone because the specific jar and maybe even the fragrance oil can affect wicking to a degree, but it's a good place to start. So in this video, I can't tell you which wick to use because I don't know what wax you're using or what jar you're using or really anything, because you haven't really made any candles yet and I don't know you. But if you check out some of the videos on the channel, like my All About Wicks video, it does break down some of these wick types, which ones tend to be better for certain waxes and in general, and at least as good starting points. Now, a wick that I use, and this is a shameless plug, I guess, but a wick that I use a lot is called the Premier 700 series wick. It is a cotton wick. I've used them for 10 plus years, I think, because the waxes I use like them a lot, and I use a lot of different waxes. I sell them on the website now as a distributor, mostly because I had been using them for so long, I was already buying tens of thousands of them. So it kind of made sense. So I started selling them back in January. They've been a big hit. Check out the reviews. A lot of people love them in various types of waxes. So if you are having a problem finding what wick to use and you're having a hard time getting suggestions, it's a good wick to start with because they work in so many different types of waxes. And if you need help, shoot me a message on the website. Me or someone will answer and try to give you a good starting point for what wick size to use based on your wax and your jar. So make sure you tell us that information. Every different type of wick, so the Premier 700 series, HTP wicks, CD wicks, Eco wicks, zinc core wicks, paper core wicks, there's so many. They all have different sizes in that series. So some are, for example, the Premier 700 series. There's Premier 725, 735, 750s, 775s. They're all different sizes, and they are meant to handle larger diameters, larger candles, to get a larger flame, to melt a larger melt pool. I feel like I just said melt a lot. And sometimes, if you're going to do 2 wicks, you would use 2 smaller ones versus 1 large one. But Eco wicks, they have Eco 2, 4, 6, and 8. By the way, I just started selling Eco wicks too. So if anyone does use Eco wicks, I just started selling them like a couple weeks ago. So they're on the website now as well, along with the other Premier 700 wicks. But all these wick series, is what I'm trying to say, is they all have different sizes. So once you've selected a proper series for your wax and your jar, then you start experimenting with the sizes to get the performance that you're after. I'm not going to say one wick type is better or worse than another. There are pros and cons to each wick. Some can handle more viscous materials better, like they'll hold up to harder to burn waxes or heavier fragrance oils. They tend to be more robust. But those wicks usually have larger mushrooms, which is the carbon buildup on the top, larger flames, more smoke, more soot. There's other wicks that don't ever really do that much, but they have a hard time with a lot of applications. And then there's wicks that just tend to be pretty damn good overall, which is the Premier 700s, for example. So the next step in this process is, of course, choosing your wick. And you'll do that through testing and experimenting until you find something that seems to be working well. And it's a good idea to make several test candles with that wick to make sure you're getting consistent results before you settle on it and know that that's the one. And there's really no shortcut to this part of the process other than a good starting point. Like, I can help you with a good starting point. Go to the website, look at guides. Although I got to tell you, be careful with wick guides from anywhere, including mine. They're based off of a certain wax and certain situations. They're not going to be specific to what you're using. So they're very, very rough guidelines. They could be way off, but at least to give you an idea of the difference between sizes in each series. So between wick guides, Facebook groups, candle suppliers, talking with people in the community, you can get a good idea usually of where to start, but ultimately you need to test to figure out which size and wick type you need for you. All right, so you got your vessel with wax that smells good and now it's burning. Great, but what if you want your candle colored? I bet a lot of people hadn't thought about that yet. Well, many of you might not, and even starting out, maybe it's not even worth doing it, like add it later, because it can get messy and it's just another part of the process, right? It's like something else to do. I like color though, so I like to color my candles quite a bit. It is optional, but if you want to try it, the different types of color that you can use are liquid dyes, powder dyes, micas, and color blocks and chips. I tend to prefer liquid candle dyes because they mix in easier with your wax. They're also easier to control because you can drop them in versus trying to cut them or weigh out powder. You can just do it by drop. And so you can have fun mixing all these different liquid colors together to make your own color. Don't mix too much or you end up with brown or black, which is not great, unless that's what you're going for. But that's just a preference, although I think most people prefer that. You can get candle dyes pretty much anywhere. By the way, I'm probably going to sell candle dyes at some point. If you check out my products, I've always got a lot of compliments on the color of my candles and what I come up with and the vibrancy and all these different cool shades of color and everything. So it is something I do care a lot about. And so down the road, I am considering selling dyes and can help you guys with that part of the process if you want. All right, so we've talked about the materials and a little bit about the process oh, we just got something in my eye. That was weird. Let's talk a little bit more about the process and how to achieve strong scent, because that's what we're all after. But maybe not everyone. Not everyone wants to get punched in the face by a fragrance. They just want to smell it nice and pleasant. So either way, let's talk about how to get a good scent. Maybe that's the best way to say it. Quality materials. We've been talking about that. Quality fragrance oils, quality waxes, different types of waxes, large melt pools. Those are all things that affect good quality or strong fragrance. A lot of people always say, I'm not getting the strength from my candle that I want. I'm not getting that strong hot throw. What am I doing wrong? What can I do? So first thing is to check the quality of your materials. Proper wicking. Is your candle burning correctly? If the flame is dying out, then you're not getting a melt pool. So you're not going to really get any kind of fragrance throw. Sometimes the candle is burning way too hot. You might be burning off the fragrance oil if the wick's like a forest fire in your candle, and you're going to burn through it too quickly anyway, so it'll be a short-lived experience no matter what. Jar size and shape. We talked about this earlier. The larger the diameter of the jar, the larger the melt pool. The larger the melt pool, more fragrance is into the air. So jar shape and size definitely makes a big difference. Smaller diameters are better for bathrooms, small rooms, medium diameters, bedrooms, kitchens, whatever. Large vessels, large diameters, double wick candles, triple wick candles are great for open spaces, living rooms, kitchens as well. A larger vessel, larger diameter, multiple wicks is not only a larger melt pool, but you get a faster melt pool. So you're getting a stronger scent throw and a faster scent throw. That's why double wick and triple wick candles are so popular. And the last thing to note about fragrance throw is that a lot has to do with location, location, location. So where you're burning the candle in the house. If you're burning it into a place that has a ton of airflow all over the place and drafts and stuff, the candle's going to perform weird and inconsistent at best. So it might smell great sometimes and weak other times. So try to put it in an area where it's not getting affected by all these other things, like airflow, and don't have it next to a vent, for example. If it's in a kitchen, it might be overtaken by whatever's going on in the kitchen. If it's being burned in a bathroom, it might be overtaken by what's going on in the bathroom. That was gross, but true. And then just make sure the candle is sized appropriately for the room it's in. Don't put a tiny candle in a big room and expect to have a great scent throw. You put a giant candle in a small room or a closet, you might walk in and actually taste it. Too much. All right, so we've talked about materials and everything else. Let's talk briefly about the process of making the candles. Now we're going to run through this because it's just a step-by-step, like here's what you do. I have plenty of videos on the channel to go into a lot more detail though about the actual fine details, let's call them, the nuances of the candle making process. But here it is in a nutshell. You're going to start by heating your wax, and you're going to heat your wax based off the manufacturer recommendations of whatever wax you chose. There's a lot of speculation. Depending on who you ask, they're going to tell you different things. Start off by just going with whatever the supplier or the manufacturer recommends. You can tweak and adjust later. Just start simple, start with the recommendations. And you're heating your wax to melt it down to a temperature that you can then mix in your fragrance and anything else later. So we'll get to that, but heat your wax. While your wax is heating up, you can do this in a pouring pot that's sitting in a double boiler on your oven or stove, not in your oven. You can do this in a small Presto pot that has a spout on it. I've got one of those linked in the video description below. You can do this in big digiboils, which I don't know if you can see it behind me, but that will melt a lot more at once. You can do this in big wax tanks if you want, which I've got on the other side of the warehouse. I'm in the warehouse, by the way. Can't tell because I got this cool little setup behind me, but around me is the entire warehouse. Long story short, you got to melt your wax in something, and you want to melt it in a way that's controlled. I would not recommend doing this in a microwave. A lot of waxes won't like that, and they will bark at you. And it's also just a good way to scorch it and burn it. You can do it in tiny little increments if you want, but just, in my opinion, just get something to melt it in. It's easier. It's better. And while that's happening, you want to wick your jars. So through this testing you've hopefully already done, or maybe you're starting your testing, you're going to put whatever wick you think is best in your jars. There's several ways to do this, and you can do this with wick centering tools. that I recommend from Norden Candle Supply, linked in the description below. I've talked about them plenty on the channel. There's plenty of videos about it as well, but they are tools. Well, I don't have the wick setting device on me right now, but it is something that sits on top of the jar with a little plunger on it, and it will center the wicks perfectly in the jar. So example, here's a 2-wick candle, and you can see that it's centered perfectly. And that is a tool that is designed specifically for whatever jar you're using. So any jar that you're using, they probably already have it, but if they don't, they will make it. You go to their website, Norden Candle Supply. Again, the link is in the description. You tell them what jar you're using. They have drop downs and stuff. They make it easy. And then they have tools that will actually drop the wick and secure it to the bottom. And then you secure them with little wick stickers or hot glue or something like that. There's a few options on the market to do that. Once the vessel is wicked, and after you pour your candles, I'm kind of leaping ahead here, but for small jars like this, this one fits perfectly, right? And that will hold the wick in place, nice and tight. Or for this one that I just showed you, this is a double wicked candle, right? So we're going to put it on here. I'll show you. Let me get it done real quick. And it does the same thing. So it holds the wicks tight. And that way, as you pour your wax in, the wicks aren't like drooping down in and getting like into the wax. You want them to stay centered and tight the whole time. And this fits that one perfectly. So again, check out Norden Candle Supply. Once you wick your jars, that's how you wick your jars to get it centered. And then these little tools help keep the wick in place. All right, so your jars are wicked. Now your wax is ready to go, hopefully, whatever temperature you're melting it to. You're going to take it off the heat. You're going to get yourself a scale, like the ones back there, or you can't see the scales at all. Oh, here's one right there. And you're going to get yourself a scale, put it on grams or ounces, whichever unit you prefer. And you're going to put your pouring pot there. And you're going to start, now you're going to weigh out your fragrance oil. So again, if you're making 16 ounces of wax and you want a 10% fragrance load, you're going to use 1.6 ounces of fragrance oil. Whatever math, whatever fragrance, whatever percentage you're going to use, that's what you're going to use. And weigh that fragrance oil out on the scale. You're going to add it to your wax and stir it in. Pop quiz, what temperature should you add your fragrance oil? It depends. There's no right answer. It's going to depend on the wax you're using mostly. And a little bit about your process and how many you're making and stuff. But most of your suppliers and manufacturers for whatever wax you chose are going to tell you basically what temperature to add your fragrance oil. It's going to range anywhere from 125 all the way up to 200 degrees. It just depends. Certain waxes like paraffin and coconut and palm waxes like you to add it really, really hot, like 190, 200 degrees even. Most waxes like somewhere between 160 and 185. There's some that you can add anytime. It really makes no difference. So the point of the story is whatever your supplier, manufacturer tells you to do, just do that. And you can adjust later if you want to. So you're going to blend in your fragrance and your color, if you're using color, and your UV inhibitor. I would actually add that first probably, so it mixes in better. And then get these all blended nice together. Do not stir super fast. You're not trying to create a bunch of bubbles and air trapped in. Just nice and easy, nice, good blend. That's all you're after. Once everything is blended well, but slowly, it is time to pour your candles into your vessel. So if you're using a small pouring pot, like this is what your fragrance and oil and everything is in, or a larger one like this, once it's ready, you're going to pour that into your vessel. Pop quiz, what temperature should you pour your candles? Again, it depends. This is fun, isn't it? At any point in candle making, if your answer is it depends, you are correct. Again, just ask your manufacturer. Just whatever the supplier, the website that you're on where you purchase materials tells you to do, just do that, and you can have fun testing and tweaking it later. The reason is they've done a lot of testing, and typically that temperature, whatever your wax is, get a thermometer, whatever temperature that is that they tell you, is probably overall the best one they found that seems to work the best. You may be wondering, why does it matter? Well, sometimes it matters because how well the wax sticks to the side of the jar. You're going to care a lot about that as a new candle maker. It's going to drive you nuts if it doesn't perfectly do that. You'll realize as a long-term candle maker, it really doesn't matter much and no one actually cares. Just us. But there are other reasons. You don't want sinkholes. You don't want bumpy, ugly tops. You don't want dips around the wicks. There's a lot of reasons that fluctuations in temperature when you're pouring your candle do matter, but you don't really know till you test it yourself. Someone pouring in a warmer temperature, ambient temperature in the house or the room, and you're pouring in a cooler one, you're going to get different results. Yours is going to cool faster than theirs, and so you might have to pour a little hotter than them. So there is no direct right answer. That's why these suppliers and websites give you recommendations, and then you tweak as you need to. But start with the recommendations. Keep it simple. The KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. Although you're not stupid, just keep it simple. Next, you're going to let the candles cool, undisturbed. Don't touch them. You might want to. You can smell them, that's fine, but try not to touch them. Let them sit till they firmly harden up. Firmly harden. I don't know if I need to say both those words, but you need to let them finish. Now, you might think it's finished. You might look at it and see the top is done, but the top's going to cool rather quickly often, and sometimes the bottom, but the middle might still be baking, so to speak. So give it time. There's no reason. Give it 24 hours. There's no reason to do anything before that. During this phase, you also want to try to protect it from any accidental damage, debris. So make sure it's in a safe area. It's not going to get bumped and knocked off a table. If you have a way to cover them, paper towels, boxes, whatever. Just try to keep it in a clean environment is all I'm saying. Just a clean environment. Once they are fully done, you're going to want to trim your wicks. So you would pop this off and trim your wick with scissors, fingernail clippers, any kind of snips, wick trimmers, which I don't have one on me, surprisingly, but I've got them linked in the video description below. They're actually designed specifically for wick trimming. That's why they're called wick trimmers. And you want to trim your wick to about 1/4 of an inch. So it's going to look small, but it's something like that. You just want it 1/4 an inch above the wax. And that is a standard pretty much across the board. Wooden wicks are kind of the only one that's sort of arguable, but that's what you're going for. So trim that, and you want that consistent all the time. Even after you burn a candle, and before you relight it, trim it again. That's just pretty standard, good practice, and that's what you want to base all your testing and everything off of. And then finally, label your products. If you're just doing this for yourself and you don't want to, you don't have to. I'm not going to tell you have to do that, but if you're going to put this on store shelves or sell it, of course, you want product labels. What's on the label? Usually the name of your company, your logo, the name of the scent, the net weight, like how much wax is in this. The net weight, by the way, is different than total weight. So this jar full of wax is like 2 pounds. This is not a 32-ounce candle. This is like a 13-ounce candle. So net weight is the actual candle inside. And the way you figure that out is weigh an empty jar, then fill it, make your product, weigh it again, and then subtract the difference. And that's your net weight. That should go on the warning label or your product label. Again, the name of your company. Whatever scent name you want to put on there. You don't have to list specific ingredients or anything like that. Just say scented candle, soy blend candle, soy candle, coconut, whatever. But have a warning label on the bottom for sure. And that's it. Have fun with this part. Make it you. Make it your brand, your niche, your theme, your business. Make it you. Whatever look you want. Have fun. This is the creative part. So you've got your finished product, but that might have been the first one you've ever made, right? So you haven't necessarily tested it yet. Probably shouldn't label it if you haven't tested it yet. But if you're testing your candles, and you haven't already done that yet, make sure before you call a product complete that you've gone through testing first. You've tested to identify the right wick, the right fragrance load. Is this candle performing the way you want it to? And it should. And the testing process has 3 primary purposes: safety, performance, and feedback. So let's break that down real quickly. Safety is pretty obvious. You don't want your candle to catch on fire. You don't want your glass to shatter because it's too hot. You don't want your candle throwing smoke and soot all over the place because it's overwicked or the wrong wick type. You also don't want it to be too small that it just keeps going out. So you're just trying to make sure the candle is burning correctly and safely. You've got a good flame, usually not more than 1 inch tall. The vessel's never getting too hot. Try to keep it under 140, 150 degrees on the outside surface. Vessel types will differ. Some vessels just never get hot on the outside, like concrete usually. But you don't want to get too hot. You don't want the flame too big. You don't want your candle cracking or catching on fire because the wick is massively oversized. You're not putting a torch in your candle. It should be a nice, small, steady flame to melt your wax. That's it. And then there's performance. So assuming you've made a safe candle, you need to make sure it actually still performs. Are you getting a melt pool? Are you using the right number of wicks? Are you using the right wick type and right size that it's burning optimally? Are you getting the scent throw you're after? It doesn't have to be incredibly large, or it doesn't have to be incredibly strong, but is it suitable? Does it seem good to you? Is it burning all the way down without tunneling? It's not too big, the wick's not too small. Are you getting a good performing candle? And then lastly, which is really important and a lot of times overlooked, and that is the feedback or information that it gives you. Testing tells you so much about your product. It tells you about your wax. It tells you about your wick. It tells you about how your candle burns and performs so that you know your products inside and out better than anyone else. That way, if a customer asks you, you know how to answer their questions. You also become aware of what a proper burning candle looks like. And so if something isn't working right, it helps you troubleshoot the problem. It allows you to identify what needs fixed. And if something's going wrong, you might know what to address, right? So information and feedback that the testing process gives you is invaluable. It's going to make you a much better candle maker. Do not skip this step, not just for safety reasons, performance reasons, but just to make you a better candle maker. It will speed up the rest of your candle making testing process down the road because you get to know your materials so much better. I get asked all the time because I'm always making test products for the for the YouTube channel, and I'm always getting new things thrown at me all the time. And I often get the wicks and everything right, like that from the get-go. It's not because I'm lucky, and it's not because I'm smarter than everyone. It's because I've been doing it a long time. So I've gotten very used to testing the process, the materials that I work with, and you get a feel for it, and you have a better idea of where to start. You're not always going to be right, but you just get more confident and comfortable of where to start. All right, so as I said before on this channel, I go into deep dives and much more detail on all of these individual topics. So whichever one you want to focus on and learn more about, go to the YouTube channel, click on videos, and you can see the plethora. And I've got different playlists and everything to help you kind of sort through them. But I would watch them all and figure out as much as you can about each one of these topics in more detail. I hope this overview, though, helps give you like a good place to start, what you should be thinking about, the different processes involved and materials involved, and how to go about things in general. The fundamentals. If you like this video, I would really appreciate if you give it a like, hit that thumbs up button below. And again, I have a big announcement coming soon to help you candle makers. So subscribe to this channel if you're not already. It's just that subscribe button below. I think it's red. I think you turn it white, something like that. Either way, just click it. Actually, there's a little bell. You got to hit that too. And that will say anytime Black Tie Barn or Wade posts a new video, it'll just show up and alert you that I've got a new video so you don't miss anything. All right, guys, thank you. Don't forget, I am doing consultations below. You can find a link to how to book consults with me. I do 30 for 30, or you can book a whole hour if you want, whatever. Check out the reviews on that, and hopefully talk to you soon, either in another video or in those consultations. And don't forget to check out the website if you want to learn more about me, my company, look at the wicks that I sell or anything like that. So that being said, I'm gonna let you go. This ended up being a lot longer video than I planned, so hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.